How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another episode of DSP. Hope you guys have been enjoying the series so far. If you guys have, you guys know what to do, smash the like button. If you haven't already, consider subscribing. It really does help with the channel. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns for me, leave those down below. And with that, let's get into today's episode. So this week, I remembered, thankfully, to make sure that the audio and things were recorded properly, which is important. We're continuing our goal as usual, right? Moving towards getting the factory back up and running. However, one of the key things that I noticed during this episode was we kept maxing out on power. Now, at first I thought, oh, well, it's a power generation problem. We're not generating enough energy, right? However, after further thought, after I was done recording and I was investigating the issue a little bit further, turns out we weren't producing enough reactor rods. It appears as though we are, however, because technically when the generators pull the rod out for the short second or two that it's in its inventory, it burns a little bit of the energy. So technically we're still getting the full potential or energy potential from the reactor rods. However, because they're not satiating all the reactors, it appears as though they're all active because they're moving between the inventories, but in reality, we only have about 2/3 active or truly working 100% of the time. So it looks to be as though we're going to end up needing more reactor rods, that is, or more fuel rods than we currently possess. So that will definitely have to be something we tackle in the next episode. However, for this episode, the primary goal of mine is to finish setting up pretty much a lot of the chemical area. We have a good chunk of things pre-laid out. However, we do have to make more chemical plants. We do have to make more sorters. We do have to make pretty much all the basic materials we still need. And honestly, again, hindsight, I've said it a couple episodes ago. I probably mention it at least once every episode, or if not every other episode. With hindsight, I do think that this is a game that benefits from rebuilding a lot of your infrastructure components, so the belts, the sorters, the machines, all of it, just like I do in Factorio. Honestly, I think my next playthrough, that's probably one of the first things I'll build on a quote-unquote bus. This isn't a game that I play with a bus in mind, although technically you could still have a bus and have everything ratioed out correctly, right? It's just more of an organizational thing, less of just a spaghetti mess, right? Although I have seen people make bases both in this Factorio, Satisfactory, and they make it with the intent of it being as they want and less of some forethought to it. But I do think going forward, that will be the move, is to set up some sort of just production of belts, sorters, all of it. And then, of course, make sure that's scalable to the different tiers, right? So tier 1 and 2 of things. And then tier 1, 2, and 3 of just all of the separate components that we have, right? So just making sure that we have things scalable, so that way I don't get hemmed in, because that is one thing I have had problems with in Factorio, for instance, as the Angels, because that was the big pack we just finished. I say we just finished it, but it has been quite some months since I have finished it. If you haven't checked it out and you're interested in Factorio or just factory building games, definitely go check it out. The series is pretty good. I think it was over 100 episodes. But it was still really good, and I think very informative for that pack. And that's kind of what I try to do for all the games I play. Is I'm not necessarily an expert at playing them. However, I do feel as though I have a unique perspective. I suppose everybody, right, has a unique perspective when they're playing the game, but I do think that every game that I'm going to play, I'm going to at least try to be informative and give you guys information. Even if it's new information to me, it could also potentially be new information to you as well. Because there's definitely things that I'm learning in games that I've played for years now and hundreds, if not thousands of hours in. And there's still new things that I'm learning. So of course, I think there's always going to be things that people are going to learn. And it might, be something very nuanced for some, but could be just completely abstract and they've not ever seen it before. But anyway, to kind of go back to Dyson, really what my goal right now is because a lot of things are contingent on other sub builds we just haven't done yet. The goal is to get everything hooked up, at least in this chemical processing area, right? So that way, as other things come online, their ingredients will just flow, right? So even if we only have a trickle of resources, hopefully that's enough to either cascade into more, right? Because as belts clear up, as buffers finish, as things begin to move again, the factory wakes up, hopefully that's enough to kickstart things, right? There are a couple things that is not necessarily going to work for, and one of those is the oil processing, because I do need to get more oil. The reserve we stockpiled has completely run dry, and we'll see that here in a minute. It's imperative that we get more oil. I'll probably have to go look off world because I think we've tapped everything here, and honestly I think we're gonna have to look at a different solar system because I think this one is completely empty of oil, and technically the oil wells are still producing some oil, but it's diminishing returns. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go probably set that up at some point, either next episode, maybe we'll do that next episode, solve it power and get more oil, right? Make it an energy based episode, I suppose. But kind of a big but here is making sure that the transport time from the well to the refinery doesn't impede how much refined oil and how much hydrogen we're producing, because if that ends up slowing us down, we do want to have a stockpile here planet side. So I am going to try to at least make sure we have more raw resources or more oil, raw oil, than we currently need or currently consume. And I think that's the goal for any raw resource in a game, is you want to make sure that even though sure you can ratio it out, so I only need 200 miners or I only need 100 ore extractors, I would recommend having at least 10% more. That way you're stockpiling it, because you never know when you might have some supply chain issue, whether it's a belt somewhere broke, and so then your stockpile can at least cover you for a short time. Or perhaps maybe, in this case, oil wells, well, maybe they depreciated faster than you were anticipating, right? So it's that stockpile that at least keeps your factory going for that little bit extra. So that way you don't have to immediately grind everything to a halt and quickly fix the problem. It gives you kind of that buffer. Now, what you do with that buffer is really up to you, right? Because you could decide, depending on the game at least, I suppose, you could set up some sort of alert. I know in Factorio you could set some alerts up. I think Satisfactory you can. I don't know the logic systems in Satisfactory, so I don't know if you would be able to or not. And then in this, you really couldn't without visually seeing it, because I don't think there's any sort of like wiring in this yet. Whether or not they decide to eventually implement all like wiring and things, I think that'd be interesting. There is some pretty decent logic already baked into, I guess, the belts, which I suppose you could try to do something with. I'm sure you could, right? But whether or not you do, I think the area that it would require for you to actually do something like that would just be too big. Let's see what else. Started back all my classes this week. So at the time of this upload, I have now started on my junior year in college. going for my software engineering degree. I do think what's weird is, although I have been in college classes for the better part of 2 years now, I don't feel like I know anything more about software engineering than I did when I started. Now, I have taken several computer science classes or software engineering required classes, which is important to note because I do know that some colleges don't necessarily put you in major specific classes until your junior year. And so usually your first 2 years even, are spent on what are called gen ed classes or general education. Usually that's your math, your science, humanities, or your history, and like language arts and stuff, which I did all my humanities, had amazing professors for them. I honestly wish I could retake some of those classes. I'll probably end up trying to find, and if I have any free electives left over, I'll probably spend them on some of those fun classes. Honestly, I loved the professors that I think I could probably take any class they taught and I would enjoy it. Doesn't matter the subject. But I did learn some things in math. History for me is one of those things that, like, and I think for a lot of people, you don't really learn new stuff. Like, I mean, you learn about new things, right? But you don't learn anything new, like no new technical skills, I suppose. At least from the simple standpoint. I mean, you're probably going to write papers, or you're probably, because I know I wrote a lot of papers. The professor I had did a very, very good job at teaching how to do research, how to do proper research, but also how to do proper, like, citations for things, and not just like use a generator or anything, but how to actually put them together piece by piece by hand, which I thought was interesting because a lot of people definitely were, oh, I'll just plug it into a software and it will spit out the citation. And usually you'll get a good citation. It will be just fine. However, there is the chance that it might not be the correct citation. And well, the biggest thing that differs in high school to college are, in high school, if I cite something, right? So I was writing a paper and I found this article that I pulled some facts from, and I cite the information. Well, the citation can be off. Honestly, the citation could probably even be wrong, and you'd be fine. More often than not, I would say you'd probably be fine. Now, I'm sure everybody's had that one teacher who probably they remember would be the picky teacher who would make sure that it's 100% legitimate citation and would grade every single period, every single dot as correct or incorrect. I'm sure they probably had their ruler, checked the spacing on every single character, like down to the ink droplet on the page. Now, technically, I guess nowadays everything's digital, but you get the point there. It's interesting, though, to see how you can have high school courses, which I know a lot of people are like, oh, college must be so difficult. In my opinion, and a lot of people's opinions that I've talked to, it's, yes, more difficult. Like, it will challenge you academically, for sure. It 100% will challenge you. It will challenge you mentally as well, and financially, unfortunately, and emotionally. However, the place where it differs, I would almost argue college is a little bit easier. I don't know if that's just because of the additional freedoms you get with being in college, right? Where you notice that you have more free time, like outside of the classroom. However, that free time usually gets eaten up by studying and doing projects and working on assignments, stuff like that. But it feels as though the class themselves are easier. Probably, number one, because they're shorter, right? So if you go to high school and you're in a semester based, most of your classes will be a year long, so 2 semesters in high school. Now, you occasionally get some electives that are only a semester long, and so then you'll switch it, usually in December. But at the college level, every class is only a semester's length, or about 4 months, which feels very, very short, and it is. and the time flies by pretty quickly. And so it's like, wow, we're already done with the semester, because every single year, I say every single year, but every single semester, by the time midterms come around, and they're midterms, so they're the halfway point, although a lot of tests in college get referred to as midterms, which I think is just bizarre, because it's like, if there's more than one, why are they all called midterms? But I digress there. It's like, what the hell? The first 12 weeks have already flown by. There's only how many more weeks left? Because they're always like, oh, well, then we're going to be on break, and then we're going to be back, and then it's going to be finals. And it's like, what? Right? And so it's interesting in that regard for just being easier. I'm trying to think, what other things have I had? My history classes were really good. Science at the college level is infinitely more difficult, I would say. Just out of, I think, the way the general principles for a lot of things are. Because high school was more of a kind of gloss over everything, because they don't have, even with a year, right? So even if you have, say, physics 1 and you have a year to cover it, well, you're probably not going to get super into physics, even with just a year, because physics is a very deep topic that at the high school level, high school teachers don't have that much time, nor do they have that much room to really push students to figure out a lot of things. And because in high school, right, everything's really done in the classroom. There is homework. I had homework in pretty much all my high school classes. However, there was definitely less focus on homework, to say, right? Because you had in-class assignments, and a lot of your assignments were in class, with the occasional homework thing that would help you practice. But more often than not, the homework in high school was your practice, and it wasn't really the assignments. Whereas in college, your homework is both your practice and your assignments. And so it's usually less optional. Usually the practice is mandatory, and what you get is what you put in, is definitely what I've seen in college. And that's definitely the different standard, right? Everybody's pretty much forced to go to high school, whether they want to or not. Which is, I think, the biggest difference, right? Because you see kids. I say kids. I'm going to refer to them as that just because they're probably going to be younger than you. I don't know. Anybody younger than me is a kid. I could be 40, and I will still refer to somebody in their 20s as a kid. I mean, I'm 21 now, so I'll probably still continue to refer to people who are even the same age as me as a child. But anyway, it's one of those, I see it as you could have really hard classes, but because you're willingly doing them, right? And I think it's the same for why anybody joins the military and why you put up with certain things. Well, you're willingly doing it. You wanted to do it. Right now, sure, you could quit. You could decide to drop out. But of course, then there's obligations that you made, whether they're financial or whether they're other commitments. And so then it's a lot harder to just say, I give up. More often than not, in college, it's not so much I give up as I can no longer do this. I think most of the time it's financially. The reason students can't continue is because they don't have the money to. And sometimes they either drink themselves out of college. And I say that, unfortunately, with some truth, because there's a high percentage of college students who end up dropping out because they end up either becoming alcoholics or discovering the wonder, I say wonderful, air quotations, don't drink. Bad idea, especially in college. Wait till you're after probably 25, honestly. But finish school, then do it. And even then, don't. But yeah, college is interesting. It's easier in some ways, it's harder in others. Is it for everybody? Probably not. Do something that you enjoy doing, and if you can do it without college, by all means do it without college. However, more and more jobs require a degree, whether or not it's justified. And quite frankly, will you learn anything from it? Because me personally, I don't think I've learned too much more towards being a software engineer than I knew 2 years ago. I mean, I have since learned some more programming things, which is cool. However, I probably would have learned those at some point anyway, right? Now, my opinion on that matter will probably change, as well as my knowledge level will change by even just the end of the semester, because every class I'm taking is a computer science class this semester, along with pretty much all the classes are very theory based that I'm doing this semester. So I do think I will grow a lot academically, but as to whether or not we'll see things differently, we'll find out. Maybe I'll do an update video on college things. We'll see. I've kind of just been using Dyson Sphere as that, because right now I feel like I've just been doing the same thing in Dyson. I know I'm making progress towards our end goal of getting things back up and running, but I think for the most part, a lot of what I'm doing looks tedious. If you do want me to go more in depth of what I'm doing in the video parts behind, by all means, let me know down in the comment section. I do kind of just use Dyson right now as channel updates, life stories, random rants, and things. Mainly because the gameplay, although is pretty interesting, a lot of the things I'm doing, there's only so much I can talk about the same build or the same thing we're doing. It's just time of putting things down, using blueprints, and connecting things up in this area that I'm currently at, and discovering new problems. I'll probably try to just spice it up a little bit here and there, with maybe 1 week doing just kind of updates on channels and things, and 1 week of doing more Dyson. But with that, hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys did, you guys know what to do. Smash that like button. I'll see you in the next one.